Great. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Molly McGlynn. I'm with the Attorney General's office. Just quickly going to walk you through today's program. So each of these folks will be giving remarks up here. Then we'll do a brief on-topic Q&A for press. For that Q&A, we will be using wireless microphones. So I'll have two people from the Attorney General's office. That'll be Leon over here in the tan blazer and Charles on the back with the black. They'll be passing around those wireless microphones. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand, wait for that microphone to come to you, ask your question, and then give that microphone back to the person who gave it to you, and the folks on stage will answer that question. If you have questions for a specific person on stage or organization, please just make that clear at the beginning of your question, and please do name the outlet and your name as well, just so everyone knows who they're talking to. Awesome. Well, that sounds great, and I'll let AG Campbell kick it off.
You do sound great, Molly. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here. Good afternoon. Delighted to be here with all of you. And of course, excited to be at the TD Garden during March Madness for this important announcement. I also want to thank just the staff and the team here at the Garden for handling logistics, for also working with my team and all the stakeholders up here to make this possible. So thank you all very much. I also want to thank the NCAA staff for their coordination, of course, along with President Baker instead of Governor Baker, for just being here and coordinating.
Fine.
I'm not calling you Charlie.
Yeah, okay.
So anyway, delighted to be up here with of course, this set of individuals, but including the NCAA President Charlie Baker, our former governor, the Massachusetts Gaming Commissioner Brad Hill, and the Mass Council on Gaming and Health CEO Marlene Warner. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your partnership. I also want to thank, and this is, if I miss anyone, we will correct that, but I think I have everyone. I want to thank Steve Crosby, who is sitting up in the front. He will be here throughout the program, who's the co-founder of the Civic Action Project. Representatives who are also here from the Boston Red Sox, the Boston Bruins, the Boston Celtics, the New England Patriots, and of course, New England Revolution for their partnership and for being here today. I also want to thank State Senator John Keenan and Victor Ortiz from the Department of Public Health's Office of Problem Gambling Services for also being here. We appreciate their partnership. As all of you know, we've entered what we are all describing as a new era of sports gambling in Massachusetts and throughout the country. In this new world, more than ever before, major sports events are now major betting events. Betting on a game or even performances within a game is just a swipe away on millions of phones throughout the Commonwealth. We know the public supports sports gaming, and of course the state legalized it in 2022. But because the state is now a participant in this market, licensing gaming operators and of course taxing their revenue, we have a responsibility to make it as safe and as responsible as we can. That work will be hard. It will take all of us in this coalition and so much more to be able to do that. Sports gaming is everywhere. It is accessible. And because it is so accessible, it poses a serious risk, a serious public health risk, particularly for young people. Think about it. We're putting an addictive product, gambling, on an already addictive device, your smartphone. And we've gone from sports gambling being illegal nearly everywhere to being legal in dozens of states throughout the country in just a matter of a few years. We need to make sure that the attention paid to the NCAA and the professional sports leagues, the avalanche of advertising and the possibility of wagering on them does not ensnare our young people into a cycle of problem gambling, law breaking, or addiction. One of my priorities as Attorney General, and of course working with my incredible team, is to work with the Massachusetts Gaming Commission to strengthen our consumer protections against the risk inherent in gambling. The Commission has been responsive to our office's recommendations, many of them, including limiting ads targeted at young people, prohibiting operators from using personal information they collect to target those users with digital ads or push alerts, and using data to identify and intercede with people whose betting habits appear to be spiraling out of control. But this work, like so many of the critical policy changes facing the Commonwealth, cannot be the work of government alone. To reach young people, and most importantly, to influence their conduct for the better, we need to collaborate with both the nonprofit and private sector on these important issues. We know that in making choices about whether to bet, when to do so, young people are going to be influenced more by the teams they support than by their state government officials. So today, I am absolutely delighted to announce the first step of that collaboration with the formation of a new public-private partnership, the Youth Sports Betting Safety Coalition. Founding members of this coalition include, of course, the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, the Massachusetts Council on Gaming and Health, the Civic Action Project, NCAA, the Boston Red Sox, the Boston Celtics, the Boston Bruins, the New England Patriots, and New England Revolution. I cannot name all of the representatives that are here from all of those agencies, but I extend gratitude to each and every one of you. You know who you are, for being a part of this coalition. In the coming months, this coalition will work together to develop a sports betting education, training, and safety curriculum for young people ages 12 through 20 throughout the state. Our goal is to equip young people with information about the laws, which are frankly changing, risk in the public health harms associated with sports betting as it increasingly permeates our sports culture, and to make sure that when all of us in the coalition are communicating about gambling in spaces watched or listened to by young people, that we're following best practices. The need is significant and it is urgent. There are alarming national and state statistics about how this demographic engages with gambling, both on sports and generally. National data from the NCAA has found that 58% of 18 to 22-year-olds have engaged in at least one sports betting activity. According to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, half of middle school students are estimated to be engaged in some form of gambling. And it is clear we're already seeing the repercussions of gambling amongst young people. The Mass Council on Gaming and Health found that teens who gamble are more likely to abuse alcohol and drugs and experience higher rates of depression than their peers who don't gamble. Addiction is a lifelong disease, and by reaching people at an early age and teaching these skills early on, we're confident that our goal to reduce the likelihood that young people will experience addiction will work. We launched this Youth Sports Betting Safety Coalition today with recognition of the urgency of the matter. We anticipate that the principles developed in this program will also help shape how responsible actors in this space communicate about the risk of gambling. And we know we need to do this with a really big tent. So we're extending invitations to sports media, licensed sports books, to join us at the outset of this critical initiative to keep sports betting, of course, legal, but most importantly, safe. The breadth of this coalition speaks to the urgency and seriousness that we are bringing to this issue. I often say, as Attorney General, one of our number one priorities is protecting the well-being of our youth, and not just as the Attorney General, but also as the mom of two beautiful boys. It's a priority. We don't want to just talk about our young people. We want to take action that is meaningful to protect their well-being. And I know that we grow up in a time where technology will continue to evolve, and I want to make sure that we meet that evolution with the safeguards young people deserve. Lastly, I want to say that if anyone out there is struggling with a gambling problem, that we know recovery is absolutely possible, and there is help out there already. And we encourage folks to call the gambling hotline, which is 1-800-327-5050. Thank you again to my coalition partners who stepped up to the plate and frankly have done so in many other ways. I'm grateful for the partnership with each and every one of you, not just the speakers who are sitting here beside me. And it's an honor and a privilege to turn it over to our former governor and now president of the NCAA, Charlie Baker, who I will not call Charlie here. But thank you for being here and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you very much, Madam Attorney General. So I've been in this job for about a year, and my appointment was announced in December of '22, and I probably talked to somewhere between 500 and 1,000 student athletes between the time the appointment was announced and I started in March, just to get a sense from them about what was on their minds. They talked about a lot of things, but they talked a lot about sports betting. And they talked about it in the context of the pressure that they feel from their peers. And this was before, at that point in time, there were maybe somewhere between 25 and 30 states where sports betting was legal. We're now upwards of around 38. And the message I kept getting from them was, there's so much of this going on. It's very hard for us to just stay away from it and out of it. And what they meant by that was being dragged into it by their classmates who wanted to talk to them about, how's so-and-so doing? Is he or she going to be able to play this weekend? What do you think your chances are? I mean, it was the exact same conversations that I was having with my classmates and schoolmates in the 70s, but back then it was just chatter in the cafeteria or the dining hall. Now it's currency, and it's become completely different for many of them, particularly when you think about the fact that the survey we did last summer that the Attorney General referenced, the percentage of kids on campus that were betting on sports was actually higher than the percentage of kids off campus. And many of them were betting on the sports at their own schools. The one other thing I'd point out about this that I think is important is the amount of traction that sports betting has, which comes with the territory of continuing to have it legalized from state to state to state, also translates into an enormous amount of advertising that's directed primarily at young people. And, you know, it used to be you had to go somewhere to make a bet. Now you don't. It's right here. And there's no one for whom this thing is a more carefully attached part of their being and their presence and their body than a young person. And when we did that survey, we also learned a couple of other things that are worth pointing out. One is that whether you were 18, 19, 20, 21, or 22, which is the group we surveyed, didn't really matter with respect to the amount of betting that you did. So even though in most states where it's legal, the 18, 19, and 20-year-olds aren't supposed to bet, they were betting at exactly the same rate as the 21 and 22-year-olds were. And whether you lived in a state where it was legal or a state where it wasn't, it didn't really have much impact on whether or not you were betting or what percentage of your group were betting. So it's basically a 50-state issue, even if it's only legal in 38. And if you think kids under the age of 21 aren't doing this, you're kidding yourselves. And so one of the things we then did was we dramatically enhanced the amount of work we were doing, both in person and online, on campus and online, to provide education and guidance to student athletes, to coaches, to compliance offices, to athletic departments generally. And we continue to grow that program, and we'll continue to grow it going forward. But in the course of all those conversations, one of the things that came up a lot from the student athletes was, you know, it's very complicated when someone says to me, you know, I bet on you guys last weekend and you lost. And I now have a problem. And you can help me solve my problem if you just don't take the first shot in the next game, or if you miss your first two free throws, or if for some reason you score less than 10 points, or maybe you score over whatever the number is. But the bottom line is the constant message coming from a lot of these student athletes was there's a tremendous amount of pressure being brought onto us by our classmates and by others with respect to this issue around my individual performance. And the argument is it's not going to affect the outcome of the game. Why not? And, you know, I'm pleased to say that, you know, a fairly significant number of states that have legalized sports betting have not legalized prop betting. But as I said before, the state-to-state thing is, let's just call it muddy and leave it at that. But for us, the opportunity to just take this off the boards for student athletes generally is a tremendous opportunity to give them a lot more of their day-to-day and their engagement with their classmates and with friends and people that they know back to them, that it will be about something other than the next game. And with respect to that, you know, 1 out of 3 student athletes, based on our data, has been harassed by bettors. 1 out of 10 college students has a gambling problem. Now, there's so much of this that we hired a company last year to actually survey traffic on social media that's being directed at athletes, coaches, and officials at our championships. And they have the ability, if they see stuff that they find that's challenging, inappropriate, to notify the platforms and ask the platforms to block those people at least for the rest of the tournament. If they see something that's worse than that concerns them, they can also notify the authorities. And we had a championship at one point last year where we thought the threat that had been delivered by a bettor to a particular team was severe enough that we gave them 24/7 police protection until they left the tournament. Now, I don't know about you, but knowing that I have 24/7 police protection might make me feel better in one way, but it probably had a pretty significant impact on the quality of their play. And the one other thing I would say is that the more of that we heard, the more I started thinking we really need to talk to states about this issue directly. And I went down and spent about an hour talking to many of my former colleagues at the National Governors Association back in February about this, and said, you know, if you're not focused on this, you should be. And if you don't have sports betting, you should still be focused on it, because I promise you there are people in your state, both student athletes and bettors, who are engaged in this activity because you can play this game across state lines. And if you do have sports betting legalized, you really ought to be talking to your public universities, your private universities, especially those that have lines on game day, and taking a real hard look at how you might be able to help us with this. And, you know, so far, Ohio, Vermont, and Maryland have all moved to prohibit prop betting at the collegiate level in their states. And we're going to continue to reach out to and engage the commissions primarily, since they're the ones who have most of the authority in most states, about this issue, and see if we can't continue to move the needle on this and get it down to as small a number of states as possible. I think for student athletes in particular, this is an enormously challenging issue, and it, you know, and for a lot of the ones that are really sort of in the bright lights, as many here will be tonight, this is just one more thing that I think all of us would like to see taken off the table. And I really appreciate the work of the commission. I appreciate you for stepping up on this one, and I really appreciate the presence of so many here today to talk about this. It's a big deal, and it's going to become a bigger one.
Thank you. I think I'm turning it over to Brad. Brad Hill.
Thank you. Before I begin my remarks, I'd like to introduce to everybody my fellow commissioners who have joined us today for this great announcement of this coalition. Chairman Jordan Maynard is right here. Commissioner Eileen O'Brien and Commissioner Nikisha Skinner are here today. They're right here in the front row, and I want you to know that each and every one of them, this is a priority for them as it is for me. And on behalf of my fellow commissioners and the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, I want to thank the Attorney General, the NCAA, and the professional sports teams and the other stakeholders that have joined us here today, because this is a very, very important day for all of us. The formation of this coalition brings together not only experts in the responsible gaming policy and regulation field, but also organizations such as our local professional sport teams, entities essential to this conversation. The professional teams that are represented here today have their products and players wagered on daily. They are committed to maintaining the high integrity of their sports. And we heard from Brad Stevens earlier as we were kibitzing down here about that issue of high integrity in the sports. But they also have the power to influence young people in ways other stakeholders do not have, and they are essential messengers to the youth about the risks associated with gambling. Risks that are concerns to all of us. I happen to live on the North Shore. I happen to live literally 20 minutes from Seabrook, New Hampshire, where any 18-year-old can go up and place a bet on a sporting event, which means that I, as a commissioner, and my fellow commissioners, and the Attorney General and others, have now come to understand that we need to capture the young people who are learning about gambling, not only at the high school level, but the middle school level. And our partners here today, who are part of this coalition, are going to work to get the message to those young people on the effects of gambling. Because it's not 21 in some cases, it's 18. And that's worrisome to all us parents. As a high school coach, I work with young people every day, and I know how important the right message from the right messenger is. And the work that's going to come out of this coalition is going to be a message that we can all be very, very proud of. There's a lot of influence on this coalition, and what we choose to focus on today speaks to our collective priorities and all of our values when it comes to this issue. The Gaming Commission, as your partners, are committed to continuing to strengthen our rules and regulations and build on our reputation as a national leader. But we're also committed to working with this esteemed coalition to develop impactful educational programs for the most vulnerable. I want to thank all of you for including us and being part of this coalition. It's something that we are all looking forward to working with you with, and I know good things are going to happen through this coalition, and we thank you for your leadership in putting this all together. So at this time, I am going to introduce to you a bright star when it comes to this issue, who's not only known here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but she is nationally and internationally known. She is our CEO of the Mass Council on Gaming and Health. I'd like to introduce to you Marlene Warner.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. I'd like to start my remarks this afternoon with an enormous thank you to Attorney General Campbell, Governor Baker, Commissioner Hill, and all the remarkable and caring people in the room today. I commend each and every one of you for committing your energy, power, and intellect to this issue. It's not always the sexiest issue, but it's one that really needs attention. The launch of this crucial youth sports betting safety coalition is only the start of the work that this powerful group can accomplish together. For the last 23 years, I've been working with the Mass Council. I have listened to so many stories of people for whom gambling has gone from a pastime or a quick way to make money to a devastation beyond your wildest imagination. People have told me about their own stories of divorce, job loss, eviction, domestic violence. Honestly, the list goes on about all the ways that this disorder can really ruin lives in some of the most terrible ways. But the really hard stories are from those of parents. Parents connecting to say that they have absolutely no idea how to help their struggling 20-year-old, 18-year-old, 16-year-old, how their son used his tuition checks on gambling and then had to drop out of college, how their daughter will no longer get out of bed due to the bet she placed and lost with kids she's now afraid of, and how their twins were so caught up in gambling on video games that they resorted to spending tens of thousands of dollars on their parents' credit cards. The data tells us that young people that gamble are more likely to be dependent on alcohol and other substances and to experience depression more than their peers that do not gamble. These stories are gut-wrenching, and even worse, we don't have a ton of resources to help them. Since 1983, the Mass Council has been there to answer those calls, but honestly, as you've heard the other speakers talk about, it's getting more and more difficult as accessibility has increased to tech-savvy young adults. They're inundated with ads and influencers. The current situation with young people in gambling in the Commonwealth necessitates urgent action. So just as our beloved sports teams work tirelessly to prevent injuries in the game, we must also work together to prevent the harmful effects of youth gambling. We need to create a game plan that protects our young people from the potential risks and the negative impacts of sports betting and all forms of gambling. We need to work with our educational counterparts, our public health partners, parents, guardians, coaches to educate and intervene in an often invisible addiction and situation, kids who are actively and illegally gambling. The importance of developing an evidence-based education, training, safety curriculum tailored to the young people, aged 12 to 20, is paramount. We'll need to band together to collaborate on curricula, online apps, and public campaigns to raise awareness about the risks of youth gambling and why the math is not in their favor, and their brains are just haven't matured to the place where they're ready to process the intricacies of gambling. We will also need to coordinate with the championship-winning Boston sports teams to get our most talented athletes to promote it being cool to wait to gamble. Finally, let me say that I also come at this as a mom. I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. I have 18 and 6-year-old sons and a 9-year-old daughter. They love sports. They really love all sports, especially the teenagers. They love to talk about their biggest sports idols and the gambling companies that endorse them. Even in my line of work, again, I've been at this 23 years, even in my line of work, there's not much content I have to share with them to combat that. But after today, I believe we can create a winning strategy that ensures a brighter future for the Commonwealth's young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlene. At this point, we're happy to take some questions, and I would just ask that they be on this topic and not something else.
Chris from the Boston Herald. The question is for former Governor Baker. You were a big proponent of sports betting here in Massachusetts. You signed the bill into law.
Yep.
Do you regret signing that bill into law here?
No, and I'll tell you why. First of all, the legislation that I filed didn't include betting on college sports, okay? The bill we got back from the legislature had a nuanced approach to dealing with college sports, but did not permit prop betting. So we're one of the 17 or 18 states that have legalized sports betting, but have not legalized prop betting for collegiate sports. So I think we did the right thing. I do believe the most important thing we need to understand at this point is you have a lot of student athletes out there who are raising their hands and saying, we need some help on this. And honestly, you know, just try and experiment at some point during the tournament and follow the social media platforms of some of the kids that are playing in the men's and women's tournaments, or follow some of the team sites. The amount of traffic that comes in there and the ugliness and the brutality of it is pretty amazing. And I don't really think social media is just a whole nother thing. I don't really think anybody could have anticipated how grim some of that stuff would get and how fast.
Hi, Carrie Kavanaugh from Boston 25. You know, we hear over and over again from the operators of these sites about all the layers of protections that they have in for young people and the identification process, and they will argue that they're doing everything that they can to prevent young people from using these sites and placing bets. But you're all saying that's happening, you know, middle schoolers are placing bets, however they're doing it on people under the age of 21. You know, what kind of data do you have behind that? Is it anecdotal? And what do you say? What are the conversations with the operators of these apps?
I'll just say, Carrie, thank you for being here. There's some data, and I think we spoke to that today, but we also hear stories, whether it's reports that come through the Gaming Commission, my office, or maybe even some of the sports league or other stakeholders. But I think the operators agree that, yes, it is legal, and we want to promote it because it's legal and people are doing it, but we want to make sure it's responsible and it's safe. I just learned this morning that there's a coalition actually of operators putting together millions of dollars to do something similar to what we're announcing today. Our goal post this announcement is to actually reach out to operators and other stakeholders who we think would want to be a part of this coalition to develop this educational curriculum. And then post the development of the curriculum to think about other ways in which to make sure young people are not getting on these apps. I think the Gaming Commission, working in partnership with the Gaming Commission, has done just that through their regulations. But there's a lot more we can do, and I think their announcement just this morning speaks to the fact that they also probably have concerns about the safety and well-being of our kids or younger users and wanting to take some action and invest their resources in a response.
And may I
Yeah,
add,
of course.
Attorney General? The Mass Gaming Commission has been working with our operators for months. One of the questions that we asked during the interview process when we were giving them their licenses was this very issue. And we have now brought them back in, all of them, to give us quarterly reports. And this is the one question that is asked every single time, is what are you doing to know your customer, KYC? And they are all working feverishly with the commission and others to ensure that this doesn't happen. Does it happen? We know it happens. What we're trying to do is get to a point where it doesn't happen by, well, I'll be blunt, putting their feet to the fire and ensuring that their KYC is working. And we're going to continue those conversations. And as the Attorney General just mentioned, I'd like to think Massachusetts was a leader in talking about this issue, and because of that, other jurisdictions are now talking about it, and now you are seeing other coalitions that are being created by the operators to ensure that this doesn't happen. They have been a partner with us since day one in Massachusetts. We're starting to see that that's happening now in other jurisdictions, but here in Massachusetts, it's a conversation that started from day one and will continue moving forward. There's technology that can be put into place with the KYC, and we are nicely asking and respectfully requesting that they look into those technologies so that we know that when someone is signing in, it is the person that says that they are who they say they are.
I think the other thing to address is that this broad coalition is really important because it takes beyond technology, beyond just the gaming companies. It also takes parents. I can tell you, I know of multiple families for whom the parents opened an account, handed over the credit card to allow their child to gamble. And I think a lot of that is because they don't know any different. They still know that that child's sitting at home, not drinking alcohol, not doing drugs, but they're just gambling. And I think one of the things we need to do is address that with parents as well. So it's going to take many broad brushstrokes to pull in the right folks.
One thing I'd say, Carrie, when we did that survey last summer, it was about somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people between the ages of 18 and 22. And the rate of betting among the 18, 19, and 20-year-olds was every bit as high as it was among the 21 and 22-year-olds. And we were asking if they were betting on platforms, legal gambling. And the same thing was true with the states. I mean, it didn't. If you were the level of activity, if you were in a state where it was illegal, was exactly the same as the level of activity in the states where it was. It's a pretty clear indicator that whether it's what Molly's talking about or people just using a variety of aliases, they figured it out. And the other thing I would just say here is, remember, this is like the first inning, right? So there are going to be, the thing that's most important for all of us, I think, is when we get the incoming coming from whoever it's coming from about this is a problem, that's a problem, this is something you need to look into. We need to hear it and do something about it. And that's kind of the approach that we're taking, which is why we appreciate this.
Hi, President Baker. Esteban Bustillos, GBH News. Just two quick questions. First, in terms of your push for other states to end prop betting, how confident are you in that? And then just looking back on, like you mentioned, you've been in office a year. Looking back on some of what you've been through, how confident are you that the NCAA can handle this and some of the other changes that it's been through in your time in office?
Well, it's been an interesting year. I'll leave it at that. No one here has enough time for me to walk through that. But what I would say is, I think in many respects, there are a lot of players in this space who want to see, who don't want to see student athletes put in a challenging and compromising position, and believe the most important thing of all is their safety and security and their well-being and the integrity of the game. And I think that's true for pretty much everybody who's playing in the space. So I fully expect that we'll get a fair amount of support and cooperation sort of across the board. And I can tell you that the states, there were probably 40 governors at the National Governors Association. I would say 25 of them hung around afterwards to talk specifically about what was going on or wasn't going on in their own states. The commissions generally have a varying degree of authority on some of this stuff. Part of the reason Ohio was in a position to do something quickly was they actually had the authority administratively to make the change. I think in a number of other states, we're probably going to have to work with folks on the legislative process. But I don't hear a lot of people saying, that they don't think this could be a challenging issue for student athletes, which is kind of the door opener for an opportunity to do something about it. And as far as the first year is concerned, how much time you got? It's an interesting job, yeah.
We're going to go here in the third row, Lisa, and then Chris will go last.
Matt Rebeltowski with Sports Handle. Thanks for holding this today. Charlie, you noted some of the interactions between bettors and student athletes before. Generally speaking, how concerned are you with the role that offshore criminal syndicates are playing in the sports betting ecosystem, both on the professional level and the college level? And I have a follow-up as well.
I might let you take a swing at that if you want to, Brad, because I know that's something we were talking about when I was governor.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. The the question is, in the climate that we're in right now, how much of a concern do you have about the nexus between the offshore betting market and major sports book operators, and what needs to be done from an enforcement standpoint, to mitigate some of those risks there?
So we are actually working with the Attorney General's office on that as we speak, because many of the youth that we're talking about today are actually going to those websites to do their betting. It isn't necessarily the operators that we have here in Massachusetts. So for the last few weeks, for sure, the Attorney General's office and the Mass Gaming Commission have been talking with each other to put a plan together on how we're going to address that very need. So those conversations are taking place as we speak.
And that's pretty true on other jurisdictions as well. And I do think that's part of my first inning issue, which is you can't ignore the stuff you're hearing that's coming in.
Absolutely. And for Charlie specifically, with these major investigations that may have an offshore nexus, how critical is it to be thorough rather than swift in ensuring that all the facts come out? And with some of the colleges that are under investigation now, when do you expect a resolution in the Temple case?
So I'm not going to speak to the particulars or specifics of any investigation. That's actually an old line from my former job. But what I would say to you is I agree with you that there's a constant tension between thoroughness and getting to a decision. And I think in these particular instances, I think it's really important we pull the thread as far as we can before we make a decision. And that may mean it takes a little longer than people want. But I think at the end of the day, that's not a bad thing.
We're going to go right here in the third row.
Hi, Governor, are you concerned in your conversations with these student athletes, 500 to 1,000, you said, and they're feeling pressure from their friends? Are you concerned they're going to feel pressure from bigger time gamblers? And are you concerned someone could potentially throw a game if these props are in there?
My view on this is whatever system any of us puts in place, you try to make it as perfect as you can make it, but it will probably be imperfect. I think our goal here is educate student athletes, educate them as much as we possibly can, put real, former and current athletes in front of them so they have an opportunity to hear from and talk to people who walked in their shoes, which is what a lot of our on-campus work and our e-learning modules are involved in. Make sure we're talking to the athletic departments, the compliance officers, other people on campus who are moving information around to these folks. Do everything we can on a prophylactic basis, trying and make it possible for kids to feel comfortable to come forward and talk about stuff if they are being bothered or threatened by something. And use other technology companies to do some of the work that we're doing around traffic, following a lot of the social media traffic that's being directed at student athletes, and make sure that gets dealt with in an appropriate way. And to the extent possible, sort of just continue to adjust based on the facts as they become known. And I think, as I said earlier, I think most people who are in this ecosystem want to figure out a way to provide as much support as we possibly can for these folks. But, I wouldn't rule out the idea that something will happen somewhere, somehow, because, this is not a perfect science.
We're going to go Lisa, and then Chris with the Globe has the last question.
Hi, Lisa from Politico. Good to see you. I was just hoping, President Baker, if you could expand a little bit on how being a former governor helps you make this ask of states. I know that you've talked a little bit already about, what you talked about at the NGA, but can you just expand on that a little, how that makes you uniquely positioned to make this ask and informs other aspects of your work?
Well, I think, first of all, I get, for the most part, kind of the broad contours of the process people go through. It's sort of like what the AG must feel like when she's working with local officials. She's kind of sat in their chairs, if you've sat in people's chairs, and they know you have. I think it changes the nature of the dialogue, probably true for you as well as a former legislator. But I also think the big point I'd make here is that goal number one is to try to make sure people are as informed as they can be about what we're learning, and to encourage them to go talk to the major institutions and the student athletes in their states. And that was one of my big messages to the governors. It's one of our big messages to the gaming commissioners, the gaming commissions and the regulators, which is, don't believe me, go talk to the student athletes in your own state. Go talk to your own coaches. Go talk to your own athletic departments and compliance people. They'll be more than happy to share what their circumstances and situations are like. And to recognize and understand that, it's always a little different from one state to another, depending upon the circumstances and the situation you're in. I mean, we have 38 states that have legalized sports betting one way or another. I think 21 of them permit prop betting on collegiate sports, 17 or 18, I don't remember exactly the numbers, don't. That's a pretty good start on the fact that a whole bunch of states went down this road recognizing this would be an issue and didn't include it as part of their portfolio. And I think having some of those states engage with some of their peers, commission to commission, right? You can help me out on this? Okay. Is another way to go at it. But to sort of accept the fact that a lot of this will require a certain amount of urgent patience.
I just want to add on that piece. Obviously we formed a coalition here, and we're going to continue to expand that coalition. But on the state-to-state piece, as we look to work with our gaming commission, for example, to model and develop regulations, we turned to other states. We spoke to New Jersey, we spoke to other states that were useful as we were contemplating what we should be asking of operators, for example, what the right balance is between safety and responsible gambling, and of course allowing folks to exercise their choice and their right to be able to place a bet. So this work is happening at multiple levels across various peers, whether it's I, along with my fellow AGs, gaming commissioners working with their counterparts, folks in the civic in education, civic engagement space, et cetera. But one thing I also want to stress, because I know our great president is getting a lot of questions about athletes. This is bigger than athletes. This is bigger than college-age students who, of course, are not, at least in this state, at the age appropriate to place a bet, at least when it comes to, they can go buy a lottery ticket, obviously, but not place a bet. But it's, when we say we're going back to middle school, there's an intentionality around that based on the behavior and what we're hearing from school administrators and others across the Commonwealth. The AG's office does a lot of training currently around bullying and harassment, working with school administrators almost every single day through our Children's Justice Unit. This sort of complements that work based on what they're hearing, but makes it more targeted and more focused. And of course, the sports teams just bring an incredible credibility that we just lack. I guess we're just not as popular and amazing as the sports players, but maybe someday we will be. But until that happens, they bring the credibility and really are able to drive home that message to that younger generation who maybe someday become the athletes that have the privilege of playing for the NCAA, but then hopefully will be educated at that point to share with their peers the importance of not gambling, or if you choose to do that, how to do it in a responsible way to protect yourself and your family.
And I would just add, when we talk about talking with other jurisdictions, we do it all the time. Our regulations didn't build themselves. We had to go and look at other jurisdictions, see what worked, what didn't work. And many other jurisdictions after Massachusetts promulgated their regulations actually looked to ours when it came to responsible gaming, when it came to advertising. And we're starting to see, as we have looked to New Jersey, for many of their good regulations and others, we're starting to see even more and more look at what we do and what others do so that they can put out the best product they can put out to protect our consumers, to protect certainly those who are in harm's way and need help, and in today's case, making sure that we set up coalitions that work together, as we will today, to ensure that our young people get the education that they need.
Hi, it's Chris Sears from the Boston Globe. Just had a question for Attorney General Campbell related to the advertising piece of it. So, we all walked over here today, and I probably passed about at least a dozen garbage cans with a DraftKings logo on it, and we're in a building which is ensconced in sports betting ads, and so. I was just interested in kind of what about this initiative specifically would address that advertising issue and would protect kids from that. And I had a question for Governor Baker as well, and that's regarding prop betting. And specifically, what is your position on colleges and the conferences selling their sports data to the gambling industry? Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for the question. I think I do want to, again, extend gratitude to the Gaming Commission and our office and my team for working in partnership at the outset to think about ways in which to limit ads and those who would target young people, specifically in a certain age bracket. The operators stepped up to the plate to join us in those efforts. But of course, people have the ability to advertise. What I think will be important going forward as we develop the curriculum, and that's the next step, right? This is a coalition that won't waste time. There's a meeting, I think our first meeting is on April 30th, to develop that curriculum. As we look to pull in other stakeholders, including operators and those who advertise, other companies, third-party players too, thinking about ways in which they can streamline or think differently about how they do their jobs or put out their products will absolutely be a part of the conversation. It must be, because if it's a tool that will help limit young people of certain ages who are not supposed to be on these platforms, for example, from actually engaging in betting, great. If it's a tool that can also help if people are at the age to bet, but to do it more responsibly, and they're willing to have these conversations, wonderful. I do think it will always be a part of the conversation as it has been from the outset, and that won't change going forward. We know it plays a big role.
I'm primarily focused at this point on this prop betting issue with my colleagues at the conference and school level. I have not talked to any of them about the issue associated with data.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, everyone.